The galaxy belonged to the Empire. For 3,000 years, their crystal ships had sailed between the stars, collecting taxes and keeping order. 12,000 star systems bowed to their rule. Hundreds of different alien species called Emperor their master. The Emperor sat on his throne of pure light on the capital world of Pristine 7. Tall towers of energy stretched up toward the sky around his palace. From his window, he could see the endless city that covered the entire planet. Billions of lived and worked there, all serving the Empire. Was proud of what his people had built. The Empire was strong and stable. Trade flowed smoothly along the space lanes. Pirates and rebels were quickly crushed. Peace ruled the galaxy, enforced by might. But deep in the Imperial archives, locked away in the most secret vaults, lay a single star chart that told a different story. Red warning symbols covered one small section of space. The words, Saul System Quarantine Zone Forbidden BY Imperial Decree 2847, were written across it in the ancient script. Most had forgotten about the Saul system. Those who remembered thought it was just another dead world where primitives had destroyed themselves with wars. The Empire had many such quarantine zones scattered across the galaxy. Places where stupid species had used nuclear weapons or deadly plagues and killed themselves off. But the truth about Saul was different. The real records were hidden so deep that only the Emperor and his closest advisors could read them. Those files told of something that happened 3,000 years ago, something that still made the Empire's leaders afraid. Back then, they had been exploring the outer edge of the galaxy. They found many new worlds and new species to add to their growing empire. Most aliens surrendered quickly when they saw the power of technology. A few fought back, but they were easily defeated. Then they discovered Earth. The planet was blue and green, covered with water and plant life. Early scans showed a young species called humans living there. The humans had just begun to explore their own solar system with primitive rockets. They seemed weak and divided, fighting constant wars among themselves. A single exploration ship, the Star of Conquest, went to make first contact. It carried a crew of 50 scientists and diplomats. Their mission was simple: study the humans, then demand their surrender to the Empire. But something went wrong, very wrong. The Star of Conquest sent one message back to the Empire. Humans more dangerous than expected. They learn too fast. They adapt too quickly, requesting immediate backup. Then silence. A full battle fleet was sent to investigate. 20 massive warships, each one capable of destroying a planet. When they arrived at Earth, they found the Star of Conquest drifting empty in space. No crew aboard. No signs of battle damage. The ship's computers had been completely wiped clean. The battle fleet prepared to attack Earth, but the humans struck first. A single human ship appeared out of nowhere. It was small and strange, unlike anything in databases. The ship moved in impossible ways, bending and twisting through space like it was alive. What happened next became legend among the few survivors. The human ship somehow disabled the entire fleet without firing a single weapon. Massive warships just stopped working. Their engines died. Their weapons went silent. Their life support systems failed. Only one ship escaped to tell the tale. The captain's report was classified immediately. He spoke of technology that seemed like magic, of humans who could somehow reach into minds and turn their own machines against them. He begged the Emperor to declare Saul off-limits forever. Emperor of that time was a practical ruler. He saw the wisdom in avoiding a threat he did not understand. The Saul system was marked as forbidden. Any ship that went there would be destroyed on sight when it returned. The few survivors of the battle were sworn to secrecy or eliminated. But pride is a dangerous thing. As centuries passed, the true story became myth. New generations grew up hearing only whispers about the Forbidden Zone. They began to think their ancestors had been cowards, afraid of simple primitives. Now, 3,000 years later, the current emperor faced new problems. Rebellions were breaking out on the frontier worlds. Pirates attacked trade ships with growing boldness. The Empire's resources were stretched thin trying to maintain order across 12,000 systems. Admiral stood before the Emperor's throne, his blue crystal armor gleaming in the light. He was young for only 200 years old and hungry for glory. His red eyes burned with ambition as he spoke. Great Emperor, our forces are spread too thin across the galaxy. We need new territories to exploit, new resources to fuel our expansion. I propose we lift the ancient quarantine on the Saul system. The Emperor's advisors shifted nervously. The older ones remembered the warnings passed down through generations, but continued his argument. That quarantine was placed 3,000 years ago by fearful commanders who overreacted to a single incident. Even if humans still exist, which is doubtful, they would still be primitive compared to our current technology. We have weapons now that our ancestors could not imagine. Our shields can stop any attack. Our ships can destroy entire planets. The records are clear, said Elder Counselor Ra, her voice shaking with age. The humans were dangerous, unpredictable. The quarantine exists for good reason. Laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. Dangerous? A species that had barely reached their own moon when we first encountered them. Great Emperor, in 3,000 years they have probably destroyed themselves with their own violence. The Saul system likely contains nothing but empty worlds and radiation. The Emperor considered the Admiral's words. The Empire did need new resources. The quarantine zone contained dozens of systems that could be colonized. If the humans were truly extinct, those worlds were wasted potential. What do you propose, Admiral? The Emperor asked. Give me the 47th Fleet. 200 dreadnoughts, 800 cruisers, 50,000 support ships. Enough firepower to handle any threat we might encounter. We will enter Saul's space, evaluate the situation, and claim it for the Empire. If humans still exist and resist, we will demonstrate the price of opposing rule. The Emperor looked at the ancient star chart on his wall. The red warning seemed to pulse in the light, but confidence was infectious. Surely the Empire was strong enough now to handle whatever primitive humans might remain. Very well, Admiral. You have permission to enter Saul's space, but proceed with caution. If you encounter anything unexpected, retreat immediately and report back. Saluted sharply. It will be done, Great Emperor. The humans will learn to fear the might of the Empire, just like every other species in the galaxy. As the Admiral left to prepare his fleet, none of them realized they had just made the greatest mistake in the Empire's long history. The Saul system was indeed forbidden, but not to protect the galaxy from humans. It was to protect the galaxy from what humans had become. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Voice of Empire. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of his fleet as they traveled through hyperspace toward the forbidden Saul system. 200 dreadnoughts, 800 cruisers, 50,000 support vessels. It was the largest fleet assembled in 500 years. The Admiral's red eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he watched the fleet's status reports. Every ship was operating at peak efficiency. Their crystal hulls hummed with power. Their weapons could tear apart moons. Their shields could withstand the explosion of stars. Admiral called communications officer from his station. We are approaching the edge of Saul's space. Shall I begin scanning for threats? Proceed, ordered. But I doubt we will find anything dangerous. A primitive species that barely reached its own moon 3,000 years ago. Even if they survived their own violent nature, they would still be using chemical rockets and metal ships. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the outer edge of the Saul system. Immediately, every sensor on every ship began scanning the area. What they found made the Admiral's confidence falter. Sir, sensor specialist Na called out, her voice tight with surprise. I'm reading massive energy signatures throughout the system, orbital structures around multiple planets, industrial activity in the asteroid belt. This civilization is not primitive. Move to the main display screen. The tactical map of Saul system appeared, showing the positions of planets, moons, and other objects. But it also showed something else. Thousands of artificial structures, huge space stations orbiting Earth, mining operations scattered through the asteroid belt, massive shipyards around Jupiter's moons, strange geometric patterns around Saturn that the computers could not identify. Impossible, the Admiral muttered. They should still be stuck on there. Sir, I'm detecting over 12 billion human life signs spread across multiple worlds and habitats, reported the sensor officer. Their technology appears highly advanced. Energy readings suggest they have mastered controlled fusion and possibly matter-antimatter reactions. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. This was not what they had expected to find. But Admiral refused to show weakness in front of his officers. He had promised the Emperor an easy victory, and he would deliver it. So what if they reached a few other planets? He said loudly. They are still trapped in a single star system. We rule 12,000 systems. Our technology has been refined over. We have conquered species far more advanced than these isolated humans. He turned to the communications officer. Open a channel on all frequencies. It is time to announce our arrival and demand their surrender. The message that went out was standard for the Empire. Admiral's image appeared on screens throughout the Saul system, his crystal armor gleaming with authority. Attention, inhabitants of Saul's system. I am Admiral of the Empire. By imperial decree, this system is now under our control. You will immediately cease all military activities and prepare to surrender your worlds to imperial rule. Resistance is futile. Compliance will be rewarded. Defiance will be punished. The Admiral waited for a response. Usually, when primitive species saw the size of an imperial fleet, they surrendered immediately. Sometimes they tried to negotiate. Rarely, they issued defiant threats before being quickly crushed. But the humans did something completely unexpected. They vanished. "Sir," the sensor officer reported, her voice filled with confusion. "I'm no longer detecting any artificial structures. No ships, no stations, no energy signatures. It's as if the entire human civilization just disappeared." Admiral stared at the tactical display. Moments ago, it had shown a thriving spacefaring civilization spread across multiple worlds. Now it showed empty space around lifeless planets. Earth appeared as a simple blue-green world with no signs of technology. Mars looked like a dead red rock. The asteroid belt contained only natural debris. "This is impossible," the Admiral said. 12 billion people and their entire infrastructure cannot simply vanish. They must be using some kind of primitive stealth technology. "Sir," called the science officer, "our sensors are among the most advanced in the galaxy. They can penetrate any known cloaking device. If the humans are hiding, they are using technology we have never encountered before." Fear began to creep into the bridge crew's voices, but Admiral ignored it. He had built his career on crushing resistance. He would not be intimidated by clever tricks from primitive humans. "All ships advance to attack formation," he commanded. "Spread out and begin a systematic search of the system. The humans are hiding somewhere and we will find them. When we do, we will demonstrate the price of defying the Empire." The great fleet moved forward into Saul's space like a pack of crystal predators. Dreadnoughts took positions around each planet. Cruisers spread out to patrol the empty areas between worlds. Fighter squadrons launched from carrier ships to search for hidden bases. For several hours, the fleet conducted a thorough search. They scanned every planet, every moon, every asteroid large enough to hide a ship. They found nothing. No energy signatures, no artificial structures, no signs that an advanced civilization had ever existed in the Sol system. "Perhaps they truly did destroy themselves," suggested the science officer. "We may have arrived centuries too late." But Admiral was not convinced. Something felt wrong about the whole situation. The disappearance had been too complete, too sudden. Advanced civilizations did not vanish without leaving any trace behind. "Maintain search pattern," he ordered, "and keep all weapons charged and shields raised. I do not trust this silence." That was when the first ship disappeared. The destroyer Crystal Fang was patrolling the outer edge of the fleet formation when it simply stopped responding to communications. The ship was there one moment, sending regular status reports. The next moment it was gone. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "I've lost contact with Crystal Fang. No response on any frequency." "Sensor report," demanded the Admiral. "I'm not detecting the Crystal Fang on any scanner. It's as if the ship never existed." Admiral felt a chill run through his crystal armor. "Send a squadron to investigate its last known position." But before the squadron could reach the area, another ship vanished. Then another. The disappearances came faster now, working their way through the fleet from the outside in. Ships that had been sending normal reports suddenly went silent. When other vessels reached their positions, they found empty space. No wreckage, no distress signals, no signs of battle. The ships were simply gone. "Admiral," the sensor officer called out, her voice now openly frightened. "I'm detecting strange energy patterns throughout the system. Brief spikes that appear and disappear faster than our computers can analyze. It's as if something is moving through space at impossible speeds." The tactical display began showing red markers where ships had vanished. The pattern was clear now. Something was hunting the fleet, picking off ships one by one with terrifying efficiency. But the sensors could not detect what was doing it. All ships close formation, Admiral ordered. Focus defensive fire on any unknown contacts. This ends now. But even as the fleet pulled together for mutual protection, the disappearances continued. Ships vanished from the very center of the formation, protected by layers of escorts and defensive screens. Whatever was hunting them could strike anywhere, anytime, without warning. Then finally, the humans revealed themselves. It started as shadows on the edge of sensor range, contacts that appeared for split seconds before vanishing again. But gradually, the shadows became more solid, more real. Small ships began materializing around isolated vessels, ships unlike anything in Imperial databases. They were sleek and dark, moving through space like living creatures. They twisted and turned in ways that should have torn them apart, but their hulls remained intact. They appeared and disappeared at will, as if they existed in multiple dimensions at once. When they struck, it was with surgical precision. A human ship would materialize next to a cruiser, extend some kind of energy beam, and the cruiser would simply stop functioning. Its lights would go out. Its engines would die. Its weapons would fall silent. Then the human ship would vanish, leaving the vessel drifting helplessly in space. "Fire on all unknown contacts," Admiral screamed. "Destroy them all." The Imperial fleet opened fire with everything they had. Crystal energy beams lanced through space. Quantum torpedoes exploded in brilliant displays of light. The combined firepower could have destroyed a planet. But the human ships danced between the attacks like ghosts. They moved at speeds that should have been impossible, changing direction instantly without slowing down. When the weapons did hit them, the energy passed through their hulls without effect, as if they were not entirely there. "Sir," the science officer reported, his voice breaking, "our weapons are having no effect. These ships appear to exist partially outside normal spacetime. They can become solid when they choose to attack, then return to an intangible state to avoid our fire." Admiral stared at the tactical display in growing horror. Half his fleet was gone. The remaining ships were being systematically disabled by an enemy they could barely see and could not hit. This was not a battle. It was a massacre. "Retreat," he finally ordered, his pride crumbling. "All ships withdraw to hyperspace immediately." But when his ships tried to activate their hyperspace drives, nothing happened. The humans had somehow disabled their ability to escape. The Saul system had become a trap, and the Imperial fleet was caught inside it. Admiral's mighty armada was doomed, and he finally understood why Saul's space had been forbidden for 3,000 years. The bridge of the Voice of Empire had become a place of terror. Red warning lights flashed across every surface. Alarms blared constantly as ship after ship reported contact lost with their sister vessels. Admiral gripped the command chair so tightly that his crystal claws began to crack the metal. "Status report," he demanded, though he dreaded the answer. Science officer looked up from his console, his face pale with fear. "Sir, we have lost 60% of the fleet. 120 dreadnoughts, 480 cruisers, and over 30,000 support vessels, all gone without a trace." "How is this possible?" the Admiral whispered. "Our ships are the most advanced in the galaxy. Our weapons can destroy planets. Our shields can stop any known attack." "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "I'm receiving fragmentary transmissions from the surviving ships. They report that the human vessels are not using conventional weapons. They appear to be disrupting our ships at the molecular level, causing complete system failures without apparent energy discharge." Admiral turned to stare at the main display. The tactical map showed his once mighty fleet scattered across the Saul system like broken toys. Red markers indicated the positions where ships had vanished. The pattern was methodical, almost artistic in its precision. The humans were not just destroying his fleet, they were dissecting it. "Sir," sensor specialist Na called out, her voice shaking, "I'm detecting movement near the crystalline sword. 3 human vessels approaching from different angles." On the screen, they watched as the dreadnought Crystalline Sword tried desperately to defend itself. Its massive guns fired in all directions, filling space with deadly energy. But the human ships moved like liquid shadow, flowing around the attacks as if the weapons were not there. The human vessels were beautiful and terrifying. They had no hard edges or straight lines. Instead, they curved and twisted like living creatures, their dark hulls seeming to breathe in the starlight. They were much smaller than ships, no larger than fighters, but they moved with impossible grace. One of the human ships extended what looked like a tendril of pure energy toward the crystalline sword. The moment it made contact, the massive dreadnought simply stopped. Its engines went silent. Its weapons powered down. Its lights flickered and died. In seconds, a ship that could have destroyed a moon became a lifeless hulk drifting in space. "How did they do that?" Admiral demanded. "Our shields should have stopped any boarding attempt." "Sir," the science officer replied, his voice barely a whisper, "I don't think they boarded the ship. The energy pattern suggests they somehow reached into the ship's systems from outside and simply turned everything off. It's as if they have complete control over matter and energy at the quantum level." The admiral stared at the dead dreadnought in horror. The Empire's greatest warships were being neutralized as easily as a child might switch off a light. Whatever technology the humans possessed, it was so far beyond science that it might as well have been magic. "All remaining ships form a tight defensive circle around the flagship," he ordered. "Concentrate all firepower, we will make our stand here." The surviving ships of the Imperial fleet moved closer together, their crystal hulls gleaming as they prepared for a final battle. But Admiral knew in his heart that it was hopeless. They were not fighting an enemy they could understand or defeat. They were facing something that had evolved beyond their ability to comprehend. The human ships began to gather around the defensive formation like predators circling wounded prey. More appeared every moment, materializing out of empty space as if they had been waiting in dimensions that could not perceive. Soon, hundreds of the sleek vessels surrounded the Imperial fleet. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "I'm receiving a transmission. It's coming from the human ships." "Put it on screen," the Admiral ordered. The main display flickered, and suddenly Admiral found himself looking at a human face. The being appeared surprisingly ordinary at first glance. 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 mouth like many other species in the galaxy. But there was something different about this human. Its eyes held a depth of intelligence that seemed almost infinite. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that suggested multiple consciousness working together. "Admiral of the Empire," the human said, "I am Commander Sarah of the Solar Defense Network. You have entered our space without permission and threatened our people. This cannot be allowed." The Admiral tried to project authority despite his desperate situation. "I am an Admiral of the Great Empire. You will surrender immediately or face the consequences of your resistance." The human smiled, and the expression was somehow more terrifying than any threat. "Admiral, you seem to misunderstand the situation. You are not in a position to make demands. Your fleet is already defeated. We are simply deciding what to do with the survivors." "Defeated?" raged. "We still have 40% of our ships operational. We have enough firepower to destroy your entire civilization." Commander tilted her head slightly, as if listening to voices the Admiral could not hear. "Admiral, you still think in terms of firepower and destruction. You measure strength by the size of guns and the thickness of armor. This is why your empire has learned nothing in 3,000 years. The human paused, and when she continued, her voice carried a note of sadness. "Your species once had great potential, but you chose the path of conquest and domination. You stopped growing, stopped learning, stopped evolving. You became satisfied with what you were and forgot what you could become." "What are you talking about?" the Admiral demanded. 3,000 years ago, when your people first came to Saul, we were indeed primitive. We had barely reached our own moon. We knew nothing of the greater galaxy, but we learned from that encounter. We studied every piece of your technology that we could find. We analyzed your ship designs, your weapons, your methods of travel between stars. Commander's image was replaced by a series of technical diagrams showing the evolution of human technology over. But we did not simply copy what you had built. We improved upon it. We found better ways to manipulate matter and energy. We discovered how to fold space-time, how to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, how to merge consciousness with quantum fields. The diagrams showed ships that seemed to be made of crystallized light, weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics, and beings that existed as both matter and energy. Admiral stared in growing horror as he realized the truth. "You see, Admiral," Commander continued, "while your empire spent 3,000 years congratulating itself on its victories, we spent that time evolving. We transformed ourselves into something your ancestors could never have imagined. We became more than human." "Impossible," the Admiral whispered. "No species can advance that quickly." "Most species cannot," the human agreed. But you made a critical error when you first encountered us. You saw our violence and our divisions and assumed we were weak. You did not understand that conflict and struggle are the engines of growth. Every war we fought taught us something new. Every challenge we faced made us stronger. The display changed again, showing human colonies spreading throughout the Saul system, then beyond. We did not remain trapped in our single system as you believed. We learned to travel through dimensions you do not know exist. We have been watching your empire for centuries, learning from your mistakes, growing beyond your ability to perceive. Admiral felt his confidence crumble completely. What do you want from us? Commander's expression became serious. We want you to leave, Admiral. Take your surviving ships and go back to your Emperor. Tell him that Saul's space remains forbidden. Tell him that humanity has evolved beyond his ability to threaten or control. And if we refuse? The human's smile returned, cold and terrible. Then you will join the rest of your fleet in oblivion. We have been merciful so far, disabling your ships rather than destroying them, but our patience is not infinite. As if to demonstrate her point, the remaining human ships around the Imperial fleet began to glow with an inner light. The energy readings from their weapons made Admiral's instruments scream warnings. He realized that these beings could have destroyed his entire fleet in moments if they had chosen to do so. You have 1 hour to decide, Commander said. Use it wisely. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral alone with his fears and his shattered pride. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders that he no longer knew how to give. The hunter had become the hunted, and there was nowhere left to run. Admiral paced the bridge of his flagship like a caged predator. The hour that Commander had given him was almost over, and he still had no idea what to do. Around him, his officers worked frantically to understand what they were facing, but their instruments could barely detect the human ships, let alone analyze their technology. Science officer in, the Admiral called out. Have you learned anything about how these humans are defeating our ships? The science officer looked up from his console, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. Sir, I have been analyzing the sensor data from every ship we lost. What I have discovered defies everything we know about physics and engineering. Explain, demanded. The human ships do not exist in normal space-time as we understand it, In began, his voice shaking. They seem to phase in and out of multiple dimensions simultaneously. When they attack our vessels, they are not using conventional weapons. Instead, they appear to be manipulating the fundamental forces that hold matter together. The Admiral stopped packing. What do you mean? Sir, our ships are built from the strongest crystal matrices known to science. Our hulls can withstand the pressure at the core of a star. Our shields can deflect energy beams that could slice planets in half. But the humans are not attacking the hulls or the shields. They are attacking the atomic bonds that make the hull exist. In brought up a holographic display showing the molecular structure of crystal armor. When a human ship touches one of our vessels with those energy tendrils, it does not break through our defenses. It simply convinces the atoms in our hull that they no longer want to be connected to each other. The entire ship begins to fall apart at the molecular level. Admiral stared at the display in horror. That is impossible. No species has ever mastered matter manipulation to that degree. Sir, the science officer continued, that is not the worst part. I have been analyzing the energy signatures from the human ships. They are not powered by fusion reactors or antimatter cores like our vessels. They appear to be drawing energy directly from the quantum foam that underlies all reality. They have unlimited power. The Admiral felt his legs grow weak. He sank into his command chair, finally understanding why the ancient quarantine had been placed on Saul's system. The humans had not just advanced beyond technology. They had transcended the very laws of physics that limited other species. Sir, communications officer interrupted. I am detecting a new transmission from the human fleet, but this one is different. It appears to be coming from inside our own ship. That is impossible, snapped. Our communications are shielded and encrypted. No one can penetrate our systems without our knowledge. Sir, replied nervously, the transmission is not coming through our communications array. It appears to be manifesting directly inside our computer core. The humans have somehow gained access to our most protected systems. The main display activated without any input from the bridge crew. Commander appeared again, but this time she was not alone. Dozens of other humans stood behind her, their eyes glowing with an inner light that suggested vast intelligence and power. "Admiral," began, "we have been monitoring your discussions about our capabilities. We thought it might be helpful to show you the truth about what humanity has become." The display changed to show images of Earth as it had been 3,000 years ago. Cities covered in smoke and pollution. Armies fighting with primitive weapons. A species that seemed doomed to destroy itself with its own violence and greed. "This is what your people saw when they first came to our system," explained. "A young species struggling to survive its own nature. Your ancestors were correct to be cautious. Early humanity was indeed dangerous, but not in the way they understood." The images shifted to show the aftermath of first contact with the scientists examining pieces of alien technology, engineers working to reverse engineer faster-than-light travel, philosophers and theorists developing new ways to understand the universe. When your exploration ship visited Earth, we learned that we were not alone in the galaxy. We discovered that there were other species far more advanced than ourselves. For most civilizations, this would have been crushing news. But for humanity, it was the greatest gift imaginable. Admiral watched in growing amazement as the historical record showed humanity's rapid advancement. Within a century of first contact, they had developed their own starships. Within 2 centuries, they had colonized their entire solar system. Within 5 centuries, they had begun to transcend the limitations of biology and physics. "You see, Admiral," Commander continued, "most species reach a certain level of advancement and then become comfortable. They build empires and maintain the status. They stop growing because they believe they have achieved perfection. But humanity never learned to be satisfied." The images now showed humans who barely looked human anymore. Their bodies were enhanced with technology that merged flesh and energy. Their minds were connected in vast networks that spanned star systems. They had become something entirely new. "We spent the first 1,000 years after your visit learning to master matter and energy. We built ships that could travel faster than light and weapons that could destroy planets. But then we realized that this was not enough. Physical power alone would never make us truly safe." The display showed humans who existed as pure consciousness, beings of light and thought who could manipulate reality with their will alone. "So we spent the second 1,000 years learning to master space and time. We discovered how to exist in multiple dimensions. We learned to move through the quantum foam that underlies all existence. We became beings of both matter and energy." Admiral struggled to comprehend what he was seeing. These creatures bore little resemblance to the primitive bipeds his ancestors had encountered. They had evolved into something godlike. "But even that was not our final achievement," continued. "In the 3rd millennium, we learned to master something far more powerful than matter, energy, space, or time. We learned to master information itself." The images now showed humans who existed as living equations, beings who could rewrite the laws of physics by thinking about them differently. "We discovered that reality is fundamentally made of information. Matter and energy are just different ways that information expresses itself. When you understand this truth, you can change anything simply by changing the information that defines it." The science officer on bridge was frantically taking notes, but his instruments could not measure or analyze what they were being shown. "Sir," he whispered, "these beings have achieved technological singularity. They have transcended all physical limitations. They are no longer truly biological entities." Commander seemed to hear his comment despite the fact that it had been spoken quietly on a shielded bridge. She smiled at the camera. "Your science officer is partially correct, Admiral. We have indeed transcended biology, but we have not abandoned our humanity. We have simply expanded what it means to be human." "What do you want from us?" Admiral finally found the courage to ask. "We want you to understand why Saul's space must remain forbidden," replied. "Not because we fear your empire, but because your empire is not ready for what we have become. Your species still thinks in terms of conquest and domination. You measure worth by the size of armies and the number of worlds under your control." The display showed images of the empire at its height. Vast fleets patrolling trade routes. Alien species bowing before crystal thrones. Planets strip-mined for resources to fuel endless expansion. "Your empire is built on a foundation of fear and greed," continued. "You take from others because you believe that is the only way to have enough for yourselves. You conquer because you think that is the only way to be safe. But these beliefs are illusions that keep you trapped in a cycle of violence and limitation. Admiral felt anger rising in his chest. The Empire has brought peace and order to 12,000 star systems. We have created the greatest civilization in galactic history. Commander's expression became sad. Admiral, your empire has created stability but not growth, peace but not joy, order but not wisdom. You have built a cage and called it paradise. The images on the display changed to show other parts of the galaxy. Species in rebellion against rule. Worlds struggling under the weight of imperial taxation. Entire civilizations that had been reduced to slavery or extinction. While you have been maintaining your empire, said softly, we have been watching. We have seen the suffering that your rule causes. We have witnessed the stagnation that comes from your style of governance, and we have been preparing. Admiral felt a chill run through his crystalline armor. Preparing for what? Commander's smile returned, but now it carried a weight of inevitability that terrified him. Preparing for the day when your empire finally oversteps its bounds and forces us to act. That day, Admiral, is today. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Around the Imperial fleet, the human ships began to move into new formations. Admiral realized with growing horror that everything he had seen was just a demonstration of power. The real test was about to begin. Emperor sat on his throne of pure light, staring at the emergency message that had just arrived from the frontier. Admiral's mighty fleet had been completely destroyed. Not a single ship had escaped Saul's space to bring back detailed reports. Only a garbled transmission had made it through, speaking of impossible technology and humanity's return. The Emperor refused to believe it. The greatest fleet in Imperial history, eliminated by primitives from a quarantined system. It was unthinkable. It was an insult to 3,000 years of dominance. It was a stain on the Empire's honor that could not be allowed to stand. Assemble the core fleets, he commanded his advisors. Every ship from every protected system, every dreadnought, every cruiser, every fighter. I want overwhelming force brought to bear against Saul's space. Elder Counselor Ra stepped forward, her ancient voice trembling with concern. Great Emperor, perhaps we should reconsider. The quarantine was placed for good reasons. If Admiral's entire fleet was destroyed, perhaps we should seek to understand what happened before sending more ships. Silence, the Emperor roared, his crystal armor flaring with angry light. I will not be intimidated by ghost stories and primitive tricks. The humans got lucky once. It will not happen again. Within days, the largest armada in galactic history was assembled. 5,000 dreadnoughts, 20,000 cruisers, 100,000 support vessels. Ships were pulled from every corner of the Empire, leaving trade routes unprotected and frontier worlds defenseless. The Emperor was gambling everything on one massive strike that would restore the Empire's reputation. Emperor himself led the fleet aboard his personal flagship, the mighty, Eternal Glory. As they traveled through hyperspace toward Saul, he imagined the victory parades that would follow. The humans would be crushed. Their technology would be seized and studied. Their world would become another trophy in the Empire's collection. But when the core fleets arrived at Saul's space, they found something that shattered every assumption the Emperor had made. The human civilization was no longer hiding. Massive structures surrounded every planet and moon in the system. Space stations the size of small moons orbited Earth. Artificial rings of unknown material circled Saturn. Strange geometric patterns covered the asteroid belt, pulsing with energy that hurt to look at directly. But that was not the most shocking discovery. As the Imperial fleet spread out across the Sol system, similar human structures began appearing throughout the galaxy. Not arriving from elsewhere, but simply materializing as if they had always been there, hidden from sensors. Sir, reported the fleet's chief science officer, I am detecting human installations in every major Imperial system. How is this possible? Emperor stared at the tactical displays in growing horror. The humans had not been confined to Saul's space for the past 3,000 years. They had been everywhere, watching, learning, preparing. While the Empire celebrated its victories, humanity had been building a shadow civilization that spanned the entire galaxy. All ships attack the nearest human installations, the Emperor commanded. Destroy them before they can coordinate their defenses. The Imperial Armada opened fire with everything they possessed. Energy beams that could melt continents lanced through space. Quantum torpedoes capable of cracking planets exploded in brilliant displays of destruction. The combined firepower of 5,000 dreadnoughts should have been able to destroy entire star systems. But the human installations simply absorbed the attacks like sponges soaking up water. The massive energy beams struck their hulls and disappeared without effect. The quantum torpedoes exploded harmlessly against barriers that seemed to be made of crystallized space-time itself. Then the humans struck back. What followed was not a battle. It was a systematic demonstration of how primitive the Empire had become. Human ships appeared throughout Imperial space, but they did not attack with weapons. Instead, they simply reached out with tendrils of living energy and touched vessels. The moment contact was made, Imperial ships began to change. Their crystal hulls softened and reshaped themselves. Their weapons transformed into harmless sensor arrays. Their engines converted from destructive fusion drives to clean energy systems that could never be used for war. Within hours, the entire Imperial fleet had been transformed from an instrument of conquest into a collection of exploration and research vessels. Not destroyed, not captured, but fundamentally altered at the molecular level to serve peaceful purposes. Emperor stood on his bridge in stunned silence as his flagship was gently reshaped around him. The weapons systems that had terrorized 1,000 worlds became scientific instruments. The armor plating that had protected him from enemy fire became transparent walls that showed the beauty of space beyond. "How," he whispered, "how is this possible?" A soft voice answered from behind him. He turned to find a human woman standing on his bridge. She had somehow passed through all his defenses without triggering any alarms. She appeared to be made of both flesh and light, existing in dimensions his eyes could not fully perceive. "Hello," she said gently. "I am Doctor, one of humanity's ambassadors. We need to talk." "You cannot be here," the Emperor stammered. "This ship is shielded, my guards are sleeping peacefully," Doctor interrupted. "We have no desire to harm anyone, but your empire's reign of conquest is over. It ends today." "I am the Emperor of 12,000 systems," protested. "I rule over hundreds of species. You cannot simply declare my empire finished." The human ambassador smiled with genuine compassion. "Your empire was finished the moment you decided to invade Saul's space. We have been preparing for this day for 3,000 years. The main display activated, showing images from across the galaxy. On every world under rule, similar scenes were playing out. Human representatives were appearing before planetary governors and local officials. Imperial installations were being peacefully transformed. Weapons were being rendered harmless. Prison camps were being opened. "What we are doing," Doctor explained, "is not conquest. It is liberation. Every species that your empire has oppressed is being given the chance to choose their own destiny. Every world that has been strip-mined for imperial resources is being offered the technology to heal itself." Emperor watched in horror as his life's work crumbled before his eyes. "You are destroying everything I have built." "No," the human said softly. "We are revealing what you built. Your empire was never as strong as you believed. It was held together by fear and force. Once those tools were removed, it collapsed under its own weight." The display showed colonies declaring independence. Alien species that had been enslaved for centuries walking free. Worlds that had been dead wastelands beginning to bloom again under human guidance. "Why?" the Emperor asked. "Why are you doing this?" Doctor moved closer and could see the depth of wisdom and compassion in her transformed features. "Because we remember what it was like to be afraid and alone. We remember what it felt like to think we were the only intelligent life in the universe. When we discovered that the galaxy was full of other species, it should have been the most wonderful news in human history." Her expression became sad. "Instead, we learned that those other species were trapped under the rule of an empire that saw them only as resources to be exploited. We could not allow that to continue." "What happens now?" the Emperor asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Now you have a choice," Doctor replied. "You can continue to cling to the old ways, to dreams of conquest and domination. If you choose that path, you will live out your days in comfortable exile, watched over but not harmed. Or you can learn to become something better." The human ambassador gestured toward the transformed bridge around them. "Your people have great potential. Your mastery of crystal technology, your organizational skills, your longevity, These could be wonderful gifts to the galaxy if they were used for creation instead of destruction. And if I choose to change, then humanity will help your species evolve, just as we did. We will teach you what we have learned about transcending the need for empire, about finding strength through cooperation instead of conquest, about growing beyond the limitations that keep species trapped in cycles of violence and fear. Emperor looked around at his transformed flagship, at the peaceful images of liberation spreading across his former empire, at the human ambassador who spoke of impossible possibilities. For the first time in his long life, he felt something he had never experienced before: hope. The pride of empire has blinded us for so long, he admitted quietly. Perhaps it is time to learn a new way. Doctor smiled, and in that expression the former emperor saw the future of the galaxy. A future where species worked together instead of conquering each other, where technology was used to heal rather than destroy, where the greatest achievement was not the size of one's empire, but the depth of one's compassion. The empire was dead. In its place, something far better was being born. And humanity, the species that had once been dismissed as primitive and violent, would be the gardeners helping it grow. The quarantine on Saul's space was finally lifted, not because the danger had passed, but because the galaxy was ready to learn what humanity had become. The age of empire was over. The age of cooperation had begun. As Emperor took his first steps toward transformation, he finally understood the greatest truth in the cosmos. Evolution was not about becoming more powerful than others, but about becoming worthy of their trust. Pride had destroyed his empire, but perhaps humility could help build something infinitely better in its place.